Hello, everyone. Great to have so many people already online. I believe in a upcoming few minutes there will be even more. So let's wait for a second. But today we are actually taking a quite nice deep dive into our new feature that many of you have been requesting for a long time already. So in Salesframe, analytics has been for the past few years something that we haven't been developing as fast as all the other parts of the tool, as you might have noticed already. And now we have finally, at the beginning of this year, launched the new version of Salesframe Analytics. And that is something we will take a look today. And also already after this uh, session, you are able to then take a deep dive there and see how your own sales team has been utilizing all the contents in the library. But as you can see here, let's first take a look of overall picture, what is now new in analytics. And after that, we will take a look in the actual tool, our own analytics, how both the user view and the content view there works. If you have any questions today, feel free to add them to the chat, or I would also be delighted to have discussions later on with you. So you can also contact directly me, and we can also book a call and exchange ideas how your team could utilize the analytics even more. But let's take a view here. So in the new analytics, the key idea what we wanted to bring there was quick one view transparency. That was something that quite many admins and sales directors were requesting, that could there be one easy view where I can see how my sellers, how my team has been utilizing the tool. And also, when we then think about the content point of view, the material point of view, how different slides, different presentations have been used, what presentations or what materials haven't been used at all, now that's actually possible. So in Salesframe, we have even deeper statistics of the usage. And also one thing to remind of you, so if I don't remember that later on, is that when you have now, you get to know to the new tool, you have some ideas there, or maybe like further development or something might be missing, feel free to be in touch to us, because every idea is welcome. And we will also be launching later this year the version 2.0 of the new analytics. So we already also have some ideas we want to include there, but this is already a big and massive step forward from the previous version. So here you can see a couple of things that we have already added to the new analytics. And maybe something I want to point out a little bit more that we didn't have in the old one is that when we want to actually take a deep dive into user specific or team specific content usage, that is now more easily possible. So it's now easier to see from there which of the teams have been using these materials, because earlier, at least for me, it was sometimes difficult when I needed to find out that, okay, is all of these materials something that we actually need to have in the library? Could I get rid of these because they seem a little bit outdated, or I wasn't using those so much? And it wasn't so easy to see that, okay, somebody is using them, but who is that, and how they are utilizing them? Are they just presenting, or are they sending to customers? How customers have been then opening those? Is it only something we always send to customers, but nobody actually looks at them? So now we can see that very clearly. And what is actually quite nice also is that we can then compare very easily different presentations. So different presentations, whether they are PowerPoint or whether they are videos, embedded URLs, anything else, we can compare how they actually perform. That is quite nice. For example, when we have campaigns coming up, we can then see how those compare with each other, especially if there's a little bit different approaches, there's different length of the material sets. We can see that, okay, how much those have actually been used. But let's jump to the analytics and not take a look of the slides anymore. So when we are now in Salesframe, and actually down a little bit. So when we go to admin tools, we have now two different versions here. We have the new analytics, and we also left the old analytics visible here. So in case there is something in the old analytics you wanted to see, that is also still possible in the admin view. But when we now come to here, what we can already see is we have a couple of graphs, we have tables below here, and in the graphs we can immediately see how the usage has been developing in the past weeks. So by default, we always have selected 1 month. And there is a couple of different ways of using this. That varies quite a lot on how sales is managed in the company, whether you want to follow, for example, 1 week period, or if you want to follow the longer time period, which can be several months. But here we can easily see how the usage has been improving there. And especially if we have new team members starting up, or now from the beginning of the year, we might have some new topics that we want people to discuss with the customers. This can be handy transparency for that. Also for teams who have, or companies who have more than one sales team, you can here see how those compare with each other. And one idea also for you, like even if you have only, for example, one 10-person sales team, if the roles are a bit different, if they offer a little bit different things per person, it's not a terrible idea in Salesframe to share or separate them into different teams. So that would also create more transparency here in the tool. And of course, we can then even select more different groups, because by default, we only have the first 3 ones. But we could then also add, for example, we have the Danish partner, their other partners, which we could then see how they have been utilizing the tool in this time period. And earlier, I was mentioning about the 1 quick view of how users have been utilizing Salesframe. And this table below here is actually what I was talking about. So in this table, we have a bunch of information that we can also sort by the value we are most interested of. But this way, we can already have nice view how different people have been utilizing the tool. And especially when you know that who is the top performing sellers in your organization, you can then from here see a little bit more how they have been using the tool, what are the patterns they might have, and then share those best practices for all of their colleagues. And for example, here we can see that my colleague Henry has been presenting quite a lot during the past month. And if we change this period, let's change it to, for example, from 1st of January to this day, 27th February, it changes a little bit. So from here, we can then see that he's still leading in the stats there. And from here, it's a nice thing that you can also already see what have been the actions that the sellers have been doing. So for example, how many times they have created memo sites that they have sent to the clients. But you can then also compare that to the stats of how those memo sites have been opened. For example, Henry has a massive number of 155 memo site opens, which is basically almost four openings per day, because there has been around 8 weeks now. But that also tells quite a lot, because really often we might be, or sellers might be having difficulties on getting customers to open materials, especially on the earlier phase of the sales process they are. Especially when you are prospecting, there might be difficulties that, okay, how can I get my potential leads to open these materials more and more? And one hint we always receive from the customers already this year, I've heard it multiple times, is that if seller has created, for example, video briefing, and they mention that in the email they are sending to the customer that, hey, take a look, I recorded a short video and added some materials for you here, then those usually are more likely to be opened. And with these kind of tips, we can then make sure that everybody gets good opening rates. But with this view, you can actually know that who has already been successful, and then go interview them and see that, okay, what are you doing differently than your colleagues? So nice thing here is that we can then easily sort. For example, we could have memo site opens, we could have time presenting, which makes it easy to see how different team members have been using when there's a little bit larger group of sellers. And also here we could have different filtering on how many people we have per page, so we don't necessarily need to scroll up so many different pages. And as I was mentioning about the user groups earlier, it is also possible here to filter out by user groups or by user roles. Because, for example, in organizations where you have many admins, you might want to filter out the admin usage and just focus on the sellers. But of course, sometimes it also might be interesting to see that, okay, we do have many admins, but it would be nice that they would also test the materials a little bit, see how it looks for the sellers, and getting to know them. So I don't see it as a bad thing if admins at least take a look of the materials in Salesframe user view, but maybe even create test memo sites and see how they work there. And then when we scroll even further down, we also have different user groups. So in here, we can easily see how different groups are comparing between each other. And what we have above both of these tables is the downloading option. So it is also possible to download Excel file and there see even further. This might be useful if you are using this information in some other software. So if you want to export this information, for example, to some other analytics software. But in those cases, I also recommend you being in touch with us, because it is possible to integrate these analytics directly to other platforms. But now, when we have been focusing on the user view, let's also take a look of the content view, because that is quite interesting, especially if you are the one who is creating materials, adding them to the Salesframe. So when we go to the top, we have here by default the users, but then next to that we have content. So let's select content. And from here, we can then already see similar graphs and tables from below. So the first table is actually more of a, maybe even a reminder for every admin that we keep the library up to date, because the up to date library is probably the most important thing in Salesframe to make it to keep it alive and make people coming there back and back again. And especially if you don't work in an organization where materials need to be updated per every sales cycle in a really short period, if the normal updating frequency is in months, for example 6 months, it might be good to have a look at here every now and then to see that, okay, if we haven't been updating any materials now in past 6 months, is every file still relevant? Is there something that is outdated, or have we actually already launched some new product areas or anything new topics that we should support sellers with, so that they are able to speak more about those with customers? And for example, here we can see a quite massive peak on our own stats. My colleague has been uploading just before the New Year's Eve some materials here, and we were translating our sales materials into Danish for our partner, who then started at the first of January. So that's why we have a peak here. But this might also indicate that if you have many people updating, but you haven't had time to discuss who has uploaded what, this also gives peak of that. And separately here on the right side, we have then views how these different materials have been used in Salesframe. And this might be something you might wonder a little bit on the first time, that why do we have unique and non-unique? What does it mean? We have viewed on memo site unique, viewed on memo site non-unique, and in a similar way shown on screen unique and non-unique. So what that basically means is that, for example, on that date, we have used 3 different files. So we have sent to customers 3 different files, which is unique, and then 4 as a non-unique. So there has been some file which has been 2 times sent. In a similar way shown on screen, we can see that there has been 22 different slides that have been sent to customers, but in total there has been 32 slides that have been sent out throughout the day. This kind of scenario happens, for example, in a situation where you have different sellers using the same materials. So they vary a little bit what they send, what kind of meetings they have, but it's quite likely that they are sending also the same files, not only separate slides there. And that can also be seen on the table below. So what we see here is that it's really common in sales that you use different materials in meeting versus sending. Sometimes that might be something we have planned. We have planned to have for example, prospecting material or something we send before the meeting. Then we have presenting material where we hopefully have a little bit simplified slides, so it's not completely packed with the text. And after meeting, we send something that might be partly something we already presented. It might be a little bit more informational, full slides about something we sent, or it might even include something that seller has filled by themselves as a summary of the meeting. And that's why, for example, here, because the main filter by default is time on screen, we can already see that, oh, why none of these has been sent to customers? It hasn't been, there is 0 second on time on memo site. So you could think that, okay, none of my sellers are actually sending anything. They just present. Well, that would actually be false, because we just have a little bit different materials that we go through with clients in meetings. So then we have, if we filter by that, we have completely different slides here in this view. So that is a nice way for you to also compare and see that, okay, they are actually presenting these materials. And if you notice that you have some material that you don't have any other version of, but it would be really beneficial that sellers would also send it to the clients. From this view, you can recognize that and then make recommendations for them that, hey, I noticed that you have been presenting these and these topics a lot, and it's a great thing that you have been discussing about them. But I also recommend, especially after meeting, sending some follow-up to the customer so they can see later on. And also I recommend personally sending materials before the meeting because it makes it less likely that there is a no-show, that customer isn't even coming to the meeting. Or sometimes if you have informational content you are sending before a meeting, it can help also you to disqualify the cases. So, for example, if it wouldn't be relevant to the customer, it saves both of your time if it's been disqualified already at that phase. And there is many things we can do here in the content view because, for example, we can then filter out based by file type. It might be interesting to see how videos compare to slides or if you have URLs or anything else. And what we have done here is that even though technically YouTube and Vimeo are embedded as URL, we have added them behind video. So from videos, you can also see YouTube and Vimeo videos because they are most likely still video content. Another nice thing here is that now when you have updated only some specific folder, you can actually select that folder and go there to take a look. For example, in our product info, how those materials have been used in this selected time period. So at the beginning, when we selected from January 1st to this day, we can then see what materials have been used there on that time period. And something quite many has also been requesting is that can we see what hasn't been used at all? So by default, these tables show only materials that we have actually used at least a little bit. But if we have some materials that haven't been used at all, that can be found from inactive files. So when we select the time period, and of course, if it's a very short period, it's quite likely that there is a massive amount of materials. But especially when we have first selected a little bit longer period, we then take a look of the inactive files. We can from there see what materials have not been used on that time period. And of course, we have quite large library, so we can see here 261 pages, which is might be more than most of you have. And nice thing both in the content view and user view is that we can actually then even take a deeper view here. So if we would like to select this slide, so always when we have underlining here, we can actually select the file even. So we can go here, we can see how this specific slide has been used over time. So here we have a small thumbnail of it, and we can see that, okay, there's been a little bit less usage now than at the beginning of the year, but actually customers have been using it or viewing it as frequently also now in February. And also when we scroll down, we can see how different sellers have been using this specific slide. So it's quite common that there is somebody, for example, for this slide, apparently me, who has been showing this material to the most, but then my colleague has been sending that more to the customers. So this way you can even have a very, very transparent and specific view on each of the contents. And it doesn't only need to be a slide, it can also be different kind of file formats you want to take a look at. One thing still to mention from the bottom is that we also have possibility to see how different PowerPoints have been utilized. So let's take a look here. We have a couple of slides in this file, for example, and here we can already see a quick view how those slides have now been used on this time period. So, for example, if we would have 10 or 20 slide PowerPoint presentation we have uploaded here, we could then from here see how separate slides of that presentation have been viewed. And especially if there has been a really long time period, none of the sellers have even used this material or barely used some of the slides. You can then next time when you're updating that presentation, you can take a look of the stats and see that, okay, do we need so many slides here? Or if there is actually really important information on that specific slide, you can then recommend to your sellers that, hey, did you actually know that you could use this specific slide in these customer-facing situations, or you could talk about it this way, which would be beneficial and helpful for your customers. But this is quite nice peek at the slide information also. So we can see, especially with the newer presentations, how each of the slides are performed. And finally, I want to mention to you something we didn't actually take a look in user view, is that in a similar way as we did here, we can deep dive into user specific stats. So now when we were in the user stats, let's for example select my stats. So for this year, we can already see here how I have been using the tool, what slides I have been using the most. And if there is, for example, some my files I have uploaded, it does so in user statistics. So here we can see, for example, for a team meeting last week, I created a slide which I had fairly long time on screen. So these can then be also seen here. And what we can see here on the top also is that how the user has been in the tool on that time period, what materials they have been using, and especially when there's new people joining the company and they get to know the materials, they start to have first meetings. It is good to see that, okay, are they actually aware of all the topics we have materials of, how much they have been using those. So this really helps you also to support your sellers better. And then at the bottom, we can also see on daily stats how much there has been viewing time. So as you can see already, there is a lot of different ways of utilizing these analytics in different scenarios, because you can have approach where you just compare different sales teams, how they have been using Salesframe overall. You can have a more transparent view of how specific users have now been implementing the tool, but also from content point of view, what materials are working, what are something that we might need to improve on for customers to get interested, or do we have something that we should just clean from the library and make it nice and up to date. But this was now overall view of the new analytics. If you have any questions, feel free to be in touch. I will gladly have a sparring session with you, and we can then analyze your team's analytics and see what we could improve there. But thank you for your time and have a nice week. See ya.